This Chicago Fire pregnancy bothers me more every time I think about one major character detail. Pregnancy can be a joyous experience for a week or two, but Chicago Fire celebrated Stella's surprise bun in the oven, while frustratingly ignoring a character detail that made her adoption story so important. Even more bothersome, since the reveal ended the Chicago Fire Season 13 finale, there's no way for the series to address this oversight until next season. It's given that Chicago Fire Season 14 will focus largely on Stella's pregnancy. In fairness, Kate getting pregnant so soon after her adoption with Severide fell through is practically a miracle. But before the series adds a tiny new member to the Chicago Fire cast, it ought to revisit why Stella went on this journey in the first place. Character additions, such as Brandon Laraquente's Chicago Fire, casting typically stem from behind-the-scenes concerns, such as the anticipated departures of Sam Carver and Darren Ritter. By contrast, Stella Kid provides a very clear in-universe reason for wanting to start a family with Kelly. Notably, she specifically mentions adoption to Severide, after telling him that she has reservations about getting pregnant. But there's a lot more to it than that. Stella first suggests adopting in Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 12, after a visit from her cousin Cole. After some initial tension between Cole and Stella's husband, Cole eventually tells Kelly the story of his mother, Stella's Aunt Laverne, taking in the younger kids after their parents died of unknown causes. Although a saint in the children's eyes, Aunt Laverne ceased to function in the midst of overwhelming postpartum depression. This forced Stella to step up and care for everybody in much the same way she does at Firehouse 51, providing a glimpse into how she became a strong and caring leader. It also explains Kid's reason for wanting to adopt. Stella says herself when speaking to Kelly at the end of the episode that she wants to adopt a child who needs help so that she can give back to the world what Laverne gave to her. She also appears to retain some silent guilt from her addiction years. But atoning through pregnancy would be a disservice to her character. Technically speaking, every child needs help. They're such notoriously bad hires that we had to pass laws just to keep them from working. But while no child can live on self-sufficiency, Stella's talk with Kelly makes it perfectly clear that she wants to take in a kid with no place else to go. In other words, it's never just been about being a mother. Between her responsibilities as a lieutenant and her relationship with Chicago Fire's former Dalmatian, Tuesday, it's already abundantly clear that Stella has the capacity to care for another life. Pregnancy will present new challenges, but none that she and Kelly can't overcome. That would all be fine if watching Stella Ride triumphantly clear the hurdles of first-time parenthood together were the main hook of the storyline. However, the additional hook of paying tribute to Aunt Laverne's legacy is what makes Stella Ride's relationship arc unique. It elevates their story above those of countless other recently betrothed TV couples. It's generally a goal in TV to keep relationships moving so they don't become stale. But thanks to Aunt Laverne, Stella Ride didn't feel like they were only starting a family because it's next on the list of traditional life goals and storylines. The surprise pregnancy walks back that uniqueness, and in more ways than one. A surprise pregnancy isn't blazing the trails of creativity to begin with, but Stella's pregnancy reveal lost some of its luster when another One Chicago series introduced its own surprise pregnancy at around the same time. Because Hannah Hasher's pregnancy comes packaged with a paternal mystery, it steals a lot of Chicago Fire's thunder. Not only is the mystery itself intriguing, but many fans are hopeful the paternity reveal could fix Chicago Med's romance problem. This is why using similar twists simultaneously in the same franchise is rarely advised, as one can easily overshadow the other. Although the next One Chicago crossover could feature two simultaneous childbirths, especially with Stella Ride's first adoption falling through, it feels too late to correct course by abandoning the pregnancy. Something feels problematic about learning that your baby was forcibly miscarried by TV writers for story reasons. But Chicago Fire already introduced a solution to the problem in the form of Natalie Evans. Stella losing her pregnancy would rank among the most heartbreaking Chicago Fire deaths since Leslie Shea. But Stella's work with Natalie in Girls on Fire could help the exact type of kids she wanted to adopt. It even seemed like she might adopt Natalie at one point, but the troubled teen could instead be the inspiration for a new program. If Stella wanted to expand Girls on Fire, or even start a separate program to offer at-risk youths general assistance, she already has the perfect ally. Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 10, introduced Kid to Amy, a teacher who wants to serve a more heroic purpose. A program for kids like Natalie would be the perfect project for both women. There's no denying that Chicago Fire is a masterclass in drama, danger, and emotional depth. With burning buildings, life and death rescues, and tangled relationships, the series has given fans plenty of reasons to stay glued to the screen. But among the many plot twists, character developments, and shocking exits, there's one storyline that continues to gnaw at me every time I revisit it: the pregnancy of Sylvie Brett. At first glance, Sylvie's pregnancy might seem like a natural progression. She's always longed for family, she's maternal by nature, and after everything she's been through, from her failed relationships to her tireless service at Firehouse 51, it felt like maybe she finally found a sense of peace. But every time I think about it, one glaring detail about her character makes the whole thing sit uneasily with me. Sylvie Brett was never portrayed as someone who was particularly desperate to have a biological child. Let's go back for a second. From the moment she arrived on Chicago Fire, a bubbly, strong-willed paramedic from Indiana, Sylvie made it clear that her values weren't necessarily tied to traditional expectations. While she spoke openly about love, marriage, and even wanting kids someday, she also often talked about the importance of building meaningful relationships first. And not once in those earlier seasons did she seem to define her worth, her future, or her purpose by whether or not she had a child of her own. This is what makes the pregnancy plot so frustrating. Over the years, Sylvie has grown into one of the most independent characters on the show. She stood her ground in tough relationships, including her rocky time with Antonio Dawson and the emotional roller coaster with Matt Casey. Let's be honest, her chemistry with Casey was electric, but even that relationship was marred by poor timing and unresolved feelings. When Casey left for Portland, we saw Sylvie make the heartbreaking decision to stay in Chicago and put herself first. And that's what made her strong. That's what made her real. So when the writers circled back and not only reunited Sylvie and Casey, but quickly wrapped a pregnancy storyline into it, one that seemed more convenient than organic, it felt jarring. Even worse, it felt like a disservice to everything we've learned about Brett over the years. What's more, the timeline of it all felt rushed. Sylvie and Casey barely had time to rebuild a stable life together before the baby news dropped. And yes, people can get pregnant unexpectedly. But in the world of television storytelling, especially for a show that typically pays such close attention to long-term arcs and character growth, this felt like a shortcut. A tidy little bow tied around a story that had once been filled with raw edges and real-world complexity. But what bothers me most is the underlying message it seems to send. For years, Sylvie has been a representation of women who put their careers, friendships, and self-discovery first. She was proof that you didn't need to follow a traditional path to find fulfillment. And then suddenly, poof, She's pregnant in a romantic fairy tale with the guy who left her once before. It gives the impression that her journey, her value, her happy ending wasn't complete until she checked off the baby box. And that feels like a step backward, not just for Sylvie, but for Chicago Fire as a whole. Let's not forget, this is a show that has always thrived on characters challenging the status quo. Whether it was Stella Kidd rising through the ranks in a male-dominated field, or Bowden's complex leadership journey, Chicago Fire has consistently shown us that fulfillment looks different for everyone. That success, happiness, and love come in many forms.